This past week, we just came up on Riot's 10-year anniversary, and I can honestly say that I am very pleasantly surprised with how fun this event has been. I can still remember my first game from around 10 years ago, where I locked in Veigar, who was a pretty new champion. On Twisted Treeline, I got 5 minutes in, and my game crashed. In the past 10 years, I've come a long way and learned a lot. From the 12-year-old kid who was just running around trying to play League of Legends on a computer that could hardly run it, to a 17-year-old challenger prodigy who was trying to go pro for NA. Now I'm here at 22 working with GameLeap, looking to provide you guys as much content as possible. Today we have a very special video. In honor of 10 years of League, I want to share with you guys 10 things that I have learned over these 10 years. Before we get into that, have you checked out our website yet? Over at GameLeap.com, we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles, as well as champion-specific courses, so if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. Now, without further ado, let's get right into these 10 tips. Now, the first and probably most important thing for improvement is something that I didn't learn for the first 3 or 4 years of playing this game. You see, after I started grinding League, it took me about a year to hit Diamond 1, but I got stuck there and I didn't know how to get out. I relied on my good reaction times, my natural talent, and my ability to learn video games quickly in order to get me to Diamond 1, but I couldn't get past that point because I was missing something. What allowed me to break free of Diamond 1 into Challenger, at the time there was no Master or Grandmaster in the game, was asking myself at the end of the day, what did I do to improve today? Instead of looking back at the day and saying, this is how many wins I got, this is how many losses I got, this is what LP I got for the day, I asked myself, what did I learn today? How did I get better? And what can I do tomorrow? I changed the way that I determined whether or not a day was successful for me. My definition of a successful day changed from an LP gain in that day to learning something new about the game that I didn't know previously. As a result, I stopped obsessing over what my LP number was, and I started caring more about what matchups I was playing and whether or not I was able to win them. In the following months, my champion pool expanded, the champions that I was comfortable playing into also expanded, and my LP skyrocketed. Every single day, I would play until I learned something new about the game. Some days I already had something in mind and I would start the day off with that thing. Some days I had nothing in mind, and my only goal was to play through solo queue, paying attention to things and why they were happening, analyzing games that I played and rewatching them to see whether or not there was something in the game that I didn't know about that was occurring. If your main goal is to improve at League of Legends, I highly recommend taking this approach. If there's one thing that you know you need to work on, then work on it a little bit every single day. If you don't have something especially in mind, then you can watch your own replays until you see something happen that you don't quite understand, and then you study it until you understand it. If every single time that you log into League, you learn something new, then by this time next year, you will have gone up at least 1 tier. Now, the next tip is something that ties in with this pretty heavily. You want to be focusing on certain things in certain elos. For example, if you're in Bronze, you don't want to be focusing on your mechanical ability. This is for one very simple reason. In order to master something, you need to have a consistent learning environment for that thing. If you're in Bronze trying to develop your mechanics, you're not going to be playing against players who are good enough to challenge you mechanically, which means you're not going to be going anywhere. When focusing on developing your mechanics, your goal is to be playing against somebody who is mechanically superior to you every single game. In lower elos, you want to focus on your macro game and your wave manipulation because these are things that you can practice consistently in every single game. It's hard to tell if you're getting mechanically better at the game when your opponents are going to vary in skill so much. Wave management and macro play is not something that requires feedback from the enemy players though, in order to determine whether or not you did a good job. Now the third thing that I learned fairly quickly, and this is that a smaller champion pool is going to equate to more wins. This is very, very simple. The less champions that you play, the more familiar that you're going to be on those champions, meaning you're going to know what you're doing and you're going to have a higher chance at winning. It's okay to want to play a lot of different champions in normals, but your ranked pool should consist of 5 champions or less for any given role in any given patch. For any roles aside from your primary, you should have 1 or 2 pocket picks that you go to, or if you're not comfortable playing that role, you should just dodge. Speaking of dodging, let's move on to the 4th tip. You see, League of Legends ranked system has 2 different aspects to it. There's the physical game of League of Legends itself, and then there's the ranked ladder. You need to be playing both the physical game and the ladder well if you want to be making the most of your climb. This means playing pick and ban properly, dodging unwinnable games, or if you're autofilled and cannot play that role. Counterpicking if you tend to play the meta, locking in your one trick whenever possible if you are a one trick. You can't just play the physical game of League of Legends, you also have to take into account the hidden mechanics of the ladder and how you can be making the most of those. Remember, MMR drives the ladder, and MMR will always be king. If you play the ladder well, your MMR is going to remain high, so you will gain more for wins and lose less for losses. Speaking of losses, let's quickly touch on those. The 5th thing that I learned is that losses happen. This is something that I didn't quite understand right away when I started playing the game. You see, every single game that I had played up until I started playing League of Legends was a game that was solo carryable. If I lost, I knew it was because I didn't perform well enough. I also knew that I could get good enough to the point where I would never lose in those games. So when I first started playing League of Legends, I thought that I was just bad at the game. I lost about half of my games, and it often felt like I wasn't a very impactful member of the team, and I didn't really have much of a say in whether or not we won or lost. And while, of course, I was bad at the game when I first started, I was getting better and better, but I was still losing around half of my games. I'm not exactly sure when it clicked, but eventually I figured out that, you know what, losses are going to happen, and that's okay. Sometimes you play a game as well as you possibly can, and you still end up losing, and that's fine. Losing a game does not have to be one person's fault. It does not have to mean that you didn't play as well as you possibly could have. Remember, even the best players out there like Faker still lose about half of their games. An important part to climbing is accepting losses and not getting upset or tilted when losses occur. Speaking of tilt, let's talk about the 6th thing that I learned. You see, I was fairly blessed. For the first 2 or 3 years that I played League, I didn't tilt at all. However, once I started playing the game competitively and started getting into high rating Diamond and Challenger games, I started tilting a lot more frequently. I would go on massive tilt sprees, and it became so much of an issue that people would put me on dodge lists when they knew that I was tilted. The biggest tilt spree that I ever went on was 48 losses out of 52 games. I went from 700 LP in Challenger all the way down to Diamond 5, 0 LP, while only winning 4 games. I would play 20 games in a row without taking a break or sleeping. People would ask me whether or not my account was boosted or if I was just tanking the account. I was completely out of control of the situation until I met somebody in Diamond 5 who recognized me as a Challenger player. I'll always remember, his name was Park and he was playing Jungle Wukong. Park said to me, "Panther, what are you doing down here? This is D5. At which point, my ADC in that game chimed in and said, "Oh, that's a boosted player." I was about to mute them all and just run at the enemy top laner until I died over and over again, but Park said something that I will never forget. First, he told my ADC to shut up, but that's not the point. What he said to me is he said, "Why do you care what other people think?" I cared so much about what people thought of me that I allowed what they said to affect how I played. At that point, I realized that he was right. I should not care what anyone thinks of me as a player. I play this game for myself. I'm not playing it for anyone else. I shouldn't have an emotional reaction to to something that somebody says to me over a video game. After that, I turned that massive loss streak, the biggest one that I ever had, into the biggest win streak that I ever had, going from D50 LP all the way up to 900 LP in less than a month. So what can you take from this? Well, there's a few things. First of all, you shouldn't tilt off of what other people say to you in a game, because their opinion does not matter. Second of all, don't go on massive tilt sprees. If you find yourself having a negative emotional response to the game, just take a breather, take a 20 or 30 minute break, and once you feel better, then you can play more. Remember, tilt is a temporary emotional reaction to something happening. If you can remove that stimulus, or you can just wait it out, then you will be able to play at 100% again soon after. Now, the seventh thing is something that I actually learned from my father. You see, my father is a football coach, and something that he says to his players is that attitude is more important than ability. Well, what does this mean? You will play against players who are better than you mechanically. It's going to happen. These are players that have more ability than you. But you can beat these players just by playing smart and playing with your team. Just because your lane opponent is better than you at the game or better than you mechanically does not mean that you can't come out with the win. Just because you get solo killed once or twice in a game does not mean that that game is over. This is the reason why comebacks can happen, and the lower elo you get, the more common comebacks are. If you're behind but you're able to maintain a good mental and just wait for the enemy to make a mistake, then you're oftentimes going to be finding some cases where you can make a comeback and end up winning a game that you're behind even 10k gold. Likewise, if you're ahead but you have a very poor attitude, then you're going to be more susceptible to throws. I'll say it again. Attitude is as important, if not more important, than ability. This is something that I will very commonly see in players who say that they have no control over the game, or that their team just feeds, or they're frustrated that they can't win. This is also a huge issue that I see in Diamond Elo. Remember, toxicity never made anyone a better player. The eighth thing that I learned is that losses are learning opportunities. We already know that everyone loses. We went over that already. But what most people don't do is they don't see losses as a learning opportunity. Every time you lost, it means the enemy team did something better than you did. If you're able to understand what that thing is, then you're going to be learning from that game, and you're going to be able to know that for the next game. While you'll still improve even if you don't take losses as a learning experience, you're going to improve a whole lot faster if you do see them as a learning experience. Remember, losing means you're getting exposure to players that are better than you. This is the best way to learn. If you play against Smurfs, don't get upset. Instead, see what they did better than you and try and learn from it. It's okay to lose. Everyone loses, everyone fails. It's up to you to determine whether or not you're going to use that loss, that failure, as a learning opportunity, or if you're just going to pretend that it didn't happen. The ninth thing that I learned is that sometimes you just need to be flexible. Your teammates aren't always going to play towards you, and there's nothing that you can do to force them to. Even if you're the most fed player on the team, they're going to want to do what they're wanting to do. In cases like these, you're going to have to be flexible, and you're going to have to play around your teammates. It sucks, it feels awful, but sometimes that is the best way to win any given game. You also want to be flexible with the different strategies that you can use. You don't always want to try and win using the same exact strategy, because sometimes that strategy won't be viable, and if you're not flexible with the different strategies that you use, then you're not going to have those available to you. The more flexible you are, the more win conditions you will have. At some point, you're going to have to learn them all anyways, so you might as well start now. Now, the final thing that I learned kind of ties them all together, and this is play to improve, not to win. Now, this tip is more for normal games rather than ranked games. In ranked, you want to be trying your best to win, obviously. However, whenever I play a different game mode other than ranked, my main goal is to get better at the game. If I play ARAMs and I get a champion that I've never played before, then I want to learn as much as I can from that one ARAM as possible. I will try all sorts of new things on that champion, until I know exactly what that champion can do. This will help me play against that champion in the future, or help me decide whether or not I want to pick that champion up and put them into my arsenal. The same thing goes for normals or any other game mode that I might play. Anytime I go into a game that isn't ranked, my main goal is to get better. Of course, winning is an additional bonus, but I want to see what it is I can and cannot do. These are the top 10 things that I learned over the past 10 years of playing League on how to improve at the game. If you enjoyed the video and want to check out more of our content, then make sure to check us out at GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses, so if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check it out using the link in the description below. As always, I'm Panther, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.